This video I will go through how I got an A-star in A-level biology recently in the 2022 exam series. I'll go through all the tips, resources and hacks required to achieve an A-star in A-level biology, and this includes the framework in which I've previously mentioned in my How I Got 4 A-Stars video, which I'll link above. Essentially it consists of 3 steps: learn, memorize and practice. Now I'll go in more detail into these 3 steps exclusive to the biology and all the textbooks, all the online resources and videos I use for each 3 steps within the framework. I will first go through the step 1, learn, step 2, memorize, step 3, practice, and also I would end off with some tips and resources for the 25-mark essay, and this is only for the AQA exam board, so you can always skip a section using the chapter markers down below in YouTube. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So step 1, learn. So as we all know, A-level biology is very content heavy. So from year 1 to year 2, you're required to learn a lot of facts. This might include some random facts you need to know, for example, the name for that enzyme, the big picture as well. For example, this could be the central dogma to molecular biology with transcription and translation. This is like all the big picture of biology. You are required to also learn about processes. There's a lot of processes in biology. This includes, for example, ventilation, the cardiac cycle, Krebs cycle, etc. And you need to learn, for example, a step-by-step process on how a neurotransmitter acetylcholine is diffused across the synaptic cleft, for example. How do we get these information into our brain? So first of all, the first step you need to know is make sure you understand it. So there's no point in regurgitating the information in the exam, because the exam series nowadays, especially with all the recent exams, is that they're actually deviating from just literally regurgitating facts, and they're more focused on using the knowledge that you've learned to apply to new scenarios. So you might be given in a scenario in the exam where you've seen this enzyme name or this molecule like succinyl-CoA that you've never ever seen before, but you have to apply the knowledge that you've learned. For example, in the Krebs cycle, you've learned about the acetyl-CoA getting into the Krebs cycle, and you might need to apply that knowledge, adapt to that new scenario, the new molecule that you've never heard or learned before. So this is what the exam series is sort of gradually going towards, and that's why it's so important to practice, which is the step 3 of this formula that I'm talking about. So make sure you understand it. So how do we understand it? Well, this is the hardest part. This is what schools are meant to do for you. So you're meant to be able to understand the content from your teachers. From my experience, majority of my learning is from self-learning. So the resources I used for A-level biology are the CGP textbooks and revision guides. So these are really good because they are actually adapted to each specific exam board, which is awesome, and I think the wording is really concise and non-waffly. There is a more waffly textbook, the official Oxford textbooks. These include more information that are potentially outside your specification, but is very useful to know and just gives you an overall big picture. However, if you're like, for example, if you want to study smart and just want to know exactly what you want to know for your exam, I really recommend the CGT textbooks. I utilize them quite a lot throughout my 2-year journey of sixth form. There's also the specification, and I have to highlight how important this is. I should have included this at the first, but the specification is for sure the most important resource that you have to grasp on. If you've not even seen your specification now, check it out. Just Google your exam board A-level biology specification. It's a big massive PDF document listing all the required learning objectives, all the required facts, knowledge, steps, practicals that you need to know. And this is literally your Bible, so make sure you print it out or save it on your iPad and highlight it, and make sure you actually know it inside out. So for me, I actually knew, 3.1.4 what that content is and what do I need to know, because I've obviously read the specification so much that I know what the layout is and what the layout of my course is. For example, now Physics and Maths Tutor is probably one of the most popular, famous, used websites for A-levels, and the reason why is because their past paper topic questions are really useful. So I'll talk more about this in the practice section of this video, but you make sure you use their topic questions. They also have notes and flashcards, which I didn't really use, but a lot of students also found them useful. YouTube is definitely one of the most important way to actually understand it. So reading the textbook, yeah, you might know, you might not know. For example, with the electron transport chain, what's going on? Like, you read these processes in the textbook. Step 1, NADH donate electrons. Step 2, FADH 2 donate electrons. Blah blah blah. But what, how, and why? All these questions you have to sort of Google it or go on YouTube to understand it. Videos that I've watched for YouTube is the Amoeba Sisters. There's a few more, but what I did is I usually just Google the content or the topic that I don't know, and then I just found a video on YouTube about it. Make sure though, if it's just a random video about the topic, that it's actually sort of linked to your specification, because with biology, you could have videos that are way too easy and way too generalized for the exam, but you could also have videos that are on the graduate level, and with, for example, Krebs cycle or metabolism, it could get really difficult into medical school levels. So make sure you be able to understand and recognize the difficulties if you're actually looking at online to help your understanding. So again, to be able to recognize how hard the content or how easy the content is, and be able to recognize if that video is suitable for you, this is what the specifications job is. So make sure you be able to know, what exactly I need to know, the specification, so you can actually tunnel vision your content and your understanding pipeline when you're looking it up online. The last one I would probably promote for my own website, which is factrecall.com. This is my own website, which I shared all of my A-level biology notes for free to download. So over my 2-year journey, for my step on understanding and learning the content as well. So before each of my lessons in school, I would actually pre-learn the content through textbooks and the videos I've mentioned before, and I write these beautiful notes because I quite enjoy the process of making these notes on my iPad, and I write these beautiful notes on my iPad. And over these 2 years, I've collated all the notes for all the topics required for your A-level biology, and they're all available to download for free on factrecall.com, which I'll link down below in the description, and I think it's an awesome resource for you guys to use as well. So let's move on to step 2, shall we, which is memorize. Now, memorizing is probably the most tedious part of these 3-step journey, and it's probably the most boring part as well. And there's just ridiculous amount of content for you to memorize that you need to somehow make it a bit enjoyable and also tailored to your needs. So for me, the major step and the major tool I use for memorizing, if you've not watched my 4 8-star video, is I've used a flashcard program called Anki. You could also use similar programs like Quizlet, or even using Notion with toggle lists. But the one I use is Anki because it really promotes the framework of active recall and spaced repetition. So active recall is when you actually actively be able to retrieve the information with some questions. So for example, how does polymerase chain reaction work? And you need to actually able to recall all the processes from your brain, and that's how you strengthen your memory in these content. Now, Anki is really useful in spaced repetition as well, because if you do it every single day, it would have an algorithm and tailor it, so it would actually show you the questions before you're about to forget, or it'll show you the questions that you're least likely to be able to remember, and that is how I'm able to memorize such a bulk amount of content as well as mark schemes required for the A-level biology just using Anki. Quizlet is also a good alternative. It's way more user friendly, and I've used it as well. Notion, in which I've also used and I recommend, and a lot of students actually use Notion with their toggle lists, and that also applies to the active recall framework by writing a question and then the answer toggled beneath. So when you look at a question, recall it using your brain, and after you've done that, you can toggle and look at the answer and make sure you got it correct. Mark schemes. Unfortunately, this is the reality. With A-level biology exams, you have to be able to memorize mark schemes. So my teacher at the end of lower 6, I believe, saw my potential in getting A star, and he saw me and told me that you have to start memorizing mark schemes. And it was a one-on-one conversation, and he said, "Jason, I think you have the potential to start memorizing mark schemes." And I realized, wow, that is the reality of the exam. Unfortunately, because this is a science subject, you need to know the mark schemes because it is so damn specific, especially for the exam board I did. It's AQA, and they have specific keywords that you must include in your answers in order to get the mark. So for me, how I memorize mark schemes is that I practice using set 3 by doing past paper questions, past papers, and for the questions I got wrong, I input it into Anki, and then I have a flashcard with the question and a flashcard at the back with the mark scheme. So every time, every day I go through Anki, I'm able to recall the mark schemes, and if there's an alternative question in a different past paper that has a similar question, for example, transcription popped up quite a lot over past years of past papers, I could just recall the mark scheme from the previous year that I've included in Yankee, and boom, I would probably get full marks because I know exactly what the examiners want. My friends and I have recommended is blurting. Blurting is where you select a topic in the A-level biology course. This could be, for example, mass transport, and you try to blurt out either by speaking out, walking around the room and speaking, or you could blurt out on an A4 piece of paper and just write as much as you know. Now this allows you to identify the gaps, so it allows you to identify gaps in your knowledge. So like when you write as much as you know, you realize, oh wait, I forgot about that and I forgot about that. And this allows you, oh wow, I really need to look back into that and make sure I am able to strengthen my deeper understanding and my memory with that particular subtopic. Mind maps also help me memorize. And this is especially important for stuff that's bigger picture, like the central dogma of biology with transcription, translation, splicing, etc., and also with metabolism, with glucose metabolism from glycolysis to the link reaction to the Krebs cycle to electron transport chain, and as well as the alternative sources of energies with, for example, fatty acids via beta oxidation. Now all of these I drew a mind map, the metabolic mind map, which links all these processes together. So when I'm studying one process, one step in detail, I can zoom in to that process. But when I'm trying to actually understand what's going on, like what on earth am I even learning about, I can zoom out and look at a mind map and understand, oh wow, that is the exact process that I'm learning, and I'm just trying to zoom in there and I can zoom out there. And this is especially important for exam questions as well, because some exam questions you might need to, like, for example, explain how glucose is metabolized, and that is a very big picture question, and you won't be required to zoom in so much detail, like, oh yeah, glucose is phosphorylated glucose-free phosphate, fructose-free phosphate, etc. But it's more about the overall process, the glycolysis, and then link reaction, and then Krebs cycle producing NADH, FADH into the electron transport chain. So that's more of the brief overview. But when you're asked, for example, a question within one process like the link reaction, then you're able to zoom in. This mind map allows you to visualize that zoom in and zoom out process really well. So now let's look at step 3, which is practice. So number one thing that I use for practice is topic questions from physics and maths tutors. Cognito is also a really good website for that, and they're all free, so you can just select the topic that you want to practice on and do the questions. Past paper questions, so in this case it's just past papers. So this is only applicable for after you've actually learned all the content in year 1 or all the content from both years of the course. So you can look at your exam board website and also PMT as well, and I mainly use PMT because they've got a good interface to select what year, what exam that what paper that you want to do. I also used an Excel past paper tracker. So near my mocks in school, as well as my real exams in May and June time, I made an Excel past paper tracker. I also used Notion to track my past paper progress as well. Basically, it's a table where I just track, oh, this year I got that, this year I got that amount, this year I got that score, that year I got that score in paper 1, 2, 3, etc., and what percentage and what grade I got. And this allows me to have a big picture of all, and it allows me to see if I'm actually progressing. This is like a quantitative way to visualize my goals and if I'm actually improving through my study methods or if I need to tweak my study method. But if you're watching this video, then you should follow my study method and it should work. So if you want to actually download my past paper tracker template, I'll link it down below for free. You can just download it and use it when you're approaching your mocks or your real exams. I also used examiner reports. So if you've not used examiner reports, you should really use them. They're really useful, and I think they're really underrated and not really overutilized. So examiner reports are basically reports on the past paper exam. So after you've done a past paper, I always love to read these examiner reports because it allows me to see which questions that the cohort has struggled or which questions the cohort has sort of excelled. And for the questions that I got wrong, I just always refer to the examiner report and read what the examiner said. Oh yeah, realize that this is a very common mistake, or if I realize that there are actually better ways or better methods to understand and better methods or ways to actually write it in the paper. And the examiner reports is sometimes just really interesting to read after you've done that past paper. So I really recommend reading the examiner report as well. And finally, Anki. So I've mentioned this in step 2 of the process, but when I'm going for past paper questions, topic question, the questions that I got wrong, I just convert to flashcards in Anki. You could also do this in Quizlet and Notion as well. Okay, so now let's get on to the 25 mark essay for biology, and this is a number 1 struggling point for all students doing AQA. And if you're not doing AQA, you can skip using the chapter markers down below on YouTube. But let me go through my essay in my real exam in the 2022, and I'll explain my process on how I got 25 out of 25 in the essay. So this is section B. So this is my 2022 exam paper. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share this with you, but who cares? I'll share it with you anyway. So in the 2022 A-level biology, in which this is the paper that I did to get an A star, I got 25 out of 25, and I was really happy once I actually got this paper back and I saw that 25 out of 25. I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I did actually do well, and it sort of shows that my essay writing technique is working, and I want to share it with you. So I selected the title of the importance of cycles in biology. Some people say it's the harder one, but for me, I much prefer doing cycles because I know quite a lot of these cycles inside out and the processes, and I'm able to link it to the importance. So the most important part, and with the AQA exams recently, is that nearly all of them have the word importance in it, and quite a lot of candidates don't really address the importance, and they lose out half the marks because it's capped at 15 out of 25 if you just regurgitate. And I nearly fell into this trap, right? So for example, if you're talking about importance, the uses and importance of ATP, you could say that ATP is used in like muscle contraction with the myosin and actin filaments. You could say ATP is used in active transport for the conformational change of carrier proteins. There's a lot of stuff you could say with ATP, but if you're just saying it, you're not actually linking, why is muscle contraction important? So you could talk about muscle contraction in the ventilation process in the intercostal muscles and allowing you to breathe in for oxygen for the terminal electron acceptor in oxidative phosphorylation. And you're not really addressing the importance of, why is active transport using ATP important? Because it allows you to maintain concentration gradients, and for example with the kidney nephrons, this is really the key part is actually addressing the importance. I made sure when I did my essay plan in the exam, so this is the essay plan I did in the exam, I made sure that I highlighted, why is it important? So for example, this plan here, I made sure I mentioned the cross-bridge cycle, which is the muscle contraction cycle. C3 convertase cycle is a little nerdy thing that I included, which is outside the specification, just to get that 25 out of 25. So for AQA, if you're not including any outside information, outside the spec information, you'll be only capped at 23. I'm quite passionate about the complement system, which is the poster over there by Kurtzker, which is part of the immune system, so I did include a big ass paragraph about that. I didn't manage to include Calvin cycle in the end, but I included the Krebs cycle, which is probably the number 1 cycle you think about when you see that topic, and the neurotransmitter cycle with acetylcholine. The number 1 thing that I want to say is that you don't want to make it GCSE level. And the examiner reports that I've been reading, again, make sure you read the examiner reports that I've mentioned in the step 3 of this revision pipeline, is that a lot of students are capped at, like, for example, 10 out of 25 because they just don't include any A-level content. And this is a very dangerous thing to do. And if you especially pick the ecology title, there's no ecology this year, fortunately, but I would always pick the biochemistry title, more of the actual molecular biology stuff, because this allows you to express content. And I would always pick content that is year 2 level. Year 1, you might want to say, like, for example, hemoglobin, oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. But if you're doing stuff like diffusion, osmosis, active transport, you could easily fall into the trap of just talking about GCSE level. And every single sentence that you mention in the essay must not be able to be understood by a GCSE student. So I made sure I consciously had that thought. This sentence, can it be understood by a GCSE student? No. So every single sentence, I made sure that it is A-level level. So that's why I picked these titles, the cross-bridge. So this is mentioned in year 2 after the nervous coordination topic, and this definitely is not covered in GCSE, about myosin actin filament sliding mechanism. Definitely not C3 convertase with C3A, C3B complement proteins, definitely not even mentioned in A-level biology, so I went above and beyond here. Krebs cycle, definitely not. So anything to do with glycolysis, link reaction, Krebs cycle, oxidative phosphorylation, photosynthesis, light independent, dependent reactions, always mention this. So pretty much every single essay in biology, you can always link it to either photosynthesis and respiration, and mentioning them definitely is probably the most important part, and always the most important part, because you could mention so many technical metabolic terms like coenzymes, NADH, FADH, which is never understood by any GCSE student. Neurotransmitter, again, is a year 2 topic. So you can see I've not mentioned any year 1 topic here to avoid myself from falling into the trap of talking about GCSE stuff. So here I have my first paragraph, the C3 convertase application cycle. I think they underlined my first paragraph because they know it's sort of the out of spec knowledge. So I talked about complement protein. So this is the stuff, the actual knowledge. So I just literally regurgitated my knowledge out. And then I had a separate paragraph about the importance of this amplification cycle in immunology. So I did link it to a bit of year 1 immunology, but I made sure I talked about like T lymphocytes, B lymphocytes, macrophages, neutrophils, opsonization, and for example with phosphate head, outer membrane, communication, lymphocytes, and this allows neutralization, etc., with a cell-mediated and humoral response. So I did link my out-of-spec knowledge to some inner-spec knowledge as well, and all this entire paragraph about importance is so important. So make sure you do include that paragraph if your essay has that word importance in it. Cross-bridge cycle here. So here I talked about all the knowledge of my cross-bridge, so I just regurgitated it about CA2+, T tubules, contraction of sarcomere. So make sure I include all the keywords and the technical terms to make myself sound smart, because this essay is really just make sure that you sound smart, and the more smart you sound, the better it is. So you can see, let's pick a random sentence. Can a GCSE student understand this? The contraction of the sarcomere with Z lines moving closer along the contraction of the H zone and I band is due to the bending of myosin head pulling actin filaments along. No, this is really a technical sentence, and definitely if I showed it to a GCSE student, they'll be like, what? So yeah, check that with every single sentence in your essay, or just have a conscious thought. Oh, if I just talk about diffusion, it's movement of stuff from high concentration to low concentration, a GCSE student definitely could understand that. So maybe not mention about that in your essay. So again, here I've talked about importance. So I linked the importance of the myosin actin cross-bridge to contraction in phototaxis, as well as external and intercostal muscles for the ventilation. So here I might fall into the trap of talking about GCSE stuff in regards to carbon dioxide and oxygen diffusing in and out, but I make sure I do sort of link it to A-level level. So I talked about the control of pressure and volume in the thoracic cavity aided by these muscles. I mentioned about, control of pressure and volume in the thoracic cavity, to make sure I level up and include a keyword to make sure it's A-level level. Mathematics, chemistry, biology, physics, you can always check it out and download them for free at factorycall.com, which is linked down below in the description. I will make more videos on each subject specific tips on achieving A stars in mathematics, chemistry, biology, and physics individually, and resources in each specific subject. And stay tuned for those videos by just pressing that subscribe button down below. I hope this video gave you some value. Please exchange some value by just simply pressing that subscribe button and click here for another one of my awesome videos, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Hasta luego.